and we are live. Welcome everyone to this special session. For those who don't know me, I'm Carlos. I'll be your host today, and it's great to have you here with us today. Today, our session will approach on EUDR compliance, what every business must know before the deadline. Big topic. One of the most significant and commented subjects in the industry recently. Well, as usual, we'll give everyone the chance to arrive and join the session. I can see some people joining us already. The audience is increasing right now. Yeah. In the meantime, guys, I would like to give the chance to our special speakers here to introduce themselves today. So first of all, I would like to thank you guys, David, Michael, Will, for being here with us today. And kicking things off with Michael. Michael, from Preferred by Nature, great to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, I'm Michael. Thank you very much, Carlos, for the invite to speak. As you say, I'm from Preferred by Nature. We work globally with responsible forestry and agriculture, and we are providing consultancy and support to companies on implementing of EUTR and EUDR and responsible sourcing practices through our global network of experts. So happy to be here and share a little bit of information into this legislation.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Michael. David, from our partners, EUV42. Welcome, David. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, and hello to everyone watching. It's great to be here. My name's David. I'm head of product at EUV42. We're a technology company, and we're building tools to help organizations make quality decisions based on data that they can trust. So it's great to be here with you today.
Super. Thank you so much, David. And last but not least, Will, our own Earth Observation Engineer here at Orbify. Welcome, Will. Thanks for being here.
Carlos. So like Carlos mentioned, I'm an Earth Observation Engineer at Orbify. So working on the satellite imagery analysis to provide environmental insights for the Orbify platform.
Super. Thank you, Will. Great, guys. I can see a lot of people joining us. Let's give 2 minutes more for everybody. And in the meantime, now that you already met our speakers, it's time to know a little bit about our audience today. Where in the world you are, guys? I can start. Hello from Portugal. You can drop in the chat here in this side here, the chat here. Drop from where in the world you are watching us today. By the way, Will, where you are, Will?
I'm in Newcastle in the UK, so it's nice and rainy outside as per usual.
Nice. What about you, Michael?
I'm based in Denmark.
Nice.
Yeah.
David?
Yeah, I'm based just outside London in the UK. Maybe slightly less rainy, but still not great for June.
Super nice. So yeah, I can see people from Poland, Germany, Denmark, India, Philippines. Nice. Indonesia. Super nice. Ghana, Canada. Yeah. So once again, we have a global audience today. Super nice to have you guys today with us as well. It's going to be a super nice session today. And before we start here, I would like to share our first poll of the day. So during the presentations, you're gonna see some polls popping up in your screen. So engage with them, answer. So the first poll today is to understand this. Okay, what's your primary role in relation to EUDR compliance within your organization? You can answer the survey right here in the close to the chat here in the right side of your screen. And while you guys answer the poll, I would like to share with you how is going to be the flow of this webinar today. So as you can see, we have 3 speakers today. Michael will kick off our session today. Then David from IOV42, and we will close the session with Will here from Orbify. After the presentations, we'll have like 5 minutes for a Q&A session. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat here in the right side of the screen. Don't worry. In the end of each presentation, we're gonna go through all the questions. If we don't have time, just for the sake of to stick to the time of this webinar, don't worry. We will individually answer your questions offline after the webinar. After each presentation as well, my colleague Konstantinos, who is the moderator of this session and is in the backstage of this session today with us, will share the speaker's contact information and materials as well. The presentations from our speakers will be available as well after their presentation. And do not forget, we're going to send to you guys the recording of this session plus the materials presented here afterwards this week yet in the email that you registered to the session today. And that's it. I think it's time to start. We have a lot of people already. And yeah, Michael, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Carlos. I will just share my screen here. I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Excellent. So thanks a lot for inviting us to speak on a very comprehensive topic. I have 10 minutes, I understand, so this will be very short. I just want to say that from our perspective, EUDR is an ambitious legislation which has the potential for positive impact on halting deforestation, forest degradation, and ensuring compliance with legal requirements at forest and farm level. However, we do see definitely some key challenges in the implementation of this legislation. That's why I'm also really pleased that we can gather knowledge leaders across different sectors that can support the implementation of the legislation and also answer questions from the audience, hopefully help the journey towards compliance with EUDR to be more efficient. But I would also say that with 10 minutes, I cannot cover everything. I'm happy to answer questions, but we also have shared a link to resources that I understand will be shared with the audience attendees after the event. I also have some links in my slides, and I recommend you to look at those also for further information. But let's go into it and basically just make the conclusion that time is limited with regards to the date of implementation of EUDR. It already came into force almost a year ago, and companies will have to implement the legislation by end this year. There are extended deadlines for small and micro enterprises as indicated here on the slide, but basically the timeline is very short, and we have with the red dot indicated that we recommend companies, of course, to take steps as soon as possible to understand their obligation, to engage in dialogue with their supply chains, both upstream and downstream, to identify obligations and start implementing solutions that meets the requirements. Briefly, the products or commodities in scope are the ones listed here, but it's very important, of course, to also understand that the legislation further explains and defines what is called relevant products in the annex of the legislation. It is only products that are listed there with the custom codes that are covered by the legislation. If your products are not mentioned in the annex, they would be exempt from the regulation. So we strongly recommend, of course, companies to already now identify the products, both companies inside the EU, but also selling into the EU or exporting from EU, to look at the list of relevant products, understand which of your products are covered by the legislation. Also very important to understand your obligation and where you sit in the supply chain, and whether you have legal obligations or whether your customers or your supply chain suppliers have obligation under this regulation. The regulation defines operators both as companies that are what we can call import operators, those placing for the first time relevant products on the EU market. But we also have domestic operators, meaning companies that place for the first time on the EU market within EU from EU forest or EU farmlands. Then we have what called downstream operators. Those would be usually processing companies placed within the EU who also have formal obligations. And it also applies to export operators. So be aware that opposite EUDR, there are now a number of companies in these supply chains that are liable under the legislation. In addition, the legislation talks about traders. That would be companies trading relevant products. That would also include, for example, large retailers who now have an obligation under the regulation. So the obligations of operators is basically to ensure that you do not place products on the EU markets or relevant products on the EU markets which do not meet the requirements for deforestation free. They have to be produced in accordance with relevant legislation of the country of production, and they have to be covered by a due diligence statement. In addition, operators are required to exercise due diligence, and I'll come back to what that means, but I think many probably have a good understanding of that, but I'll briefly go through it later. But these are the formal obligations of operators. When it comes to downstream operators, there is a distinction between SME operators, small and medium-sized enterprises, and non-SME operators. Due to time limitations, I will not go too much into the details, but it's very important for any company within EU to understand whether you are an SME or not an SME, because it's important for your formal obligations. And it's highlighted here in the gray fields, basically what the differences are. So I won't speak to that in detail. You will also receive the slides afterwards. Also for traders, the definition of SMEs and non-SMEs applies, and especially for traders who are not SMEs, it's important to understand that you will have an obligation to meet the requirements for due diligence in line with downstream operators. So traders will now also have an EUDR obligation similar to downstream operators, as explained earlier. To understand whether you are an SME or not, we've included a link here, which is the EU definition of SMEs. Recommend you to look further into that. And so a few slides about definitions. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but just basically important to understand also for the following presentation, what does deforestation actually mean? It means that the relevant products that have been fed with or been made using relevant commodities were produced on land that has not been subject to deforestation after December 31st, 2020. And for wood products, it's also, there's the requirements for for forest degradation free. It means for wood products that forests have been harvested without inducing forest degradation after December 31st, 2020. These two definitions are called very important when it comes to actually identifying whether your supply chains are, if there are risks. And this deadline is important, as is the definition of forest, which follows the FAO definition of forest. Also important to understand what does forest degradation mean, because that's also a fairly new term, and it's being further defined as part of the clarification process. Here are just shortly the high-level definition of forest degradation, how that will be understood in practice. There might be more about that in the following presentations, but this is important to understand if you are sourcing timber products. This does not apply to agricultural products. The definition of legality is very broad. It's even broader than the EUDR definition to some respect, and therefore it means that your risk assessment have to cover a wide range of legal requirements in the country of production, and there are more information about that available on some of the resources I'm sharing later. So the requirement to exercise due diligence is basically consists of 3 steps, basically. Collection of information. There's a specific list I showed just after this slide about what information you have to collect. This is an obligation of the operators and non-SME traders to have access to information for the purpose of exercising a risk assessment. The risk assessment then, of course, have to cover the criteria for deforestation, no forest degradation, and illegal compliance. And in case risks are identified, proper risk mitigation have to be implemented. So when it comes to information, and I think that's very important for today's seminar or webinar, sorry, to understand what type of information is required, and especially the new requirement to gather geolocation of all plots of land where the relevant commodities were produced, as well as the date or time range of production, is a data collection and data sharing exercise, which is extremely important to find cost-efficient and robust solutions to comply with this requirement. And of course, this is one that creates a lot of challenges in supply chains. In addition to that, of course, important to note that there has to be verifiable evidence that products are deforestation-free, and also verifiable evidence that products are produced in compliance with relevant legislation. So based on this information, companies are required, the liable companies are required to do risk assessment. That means understanding the risk at the supply chain level on deforestation, forest degradation, if it's timber products, and on legality. And also for the specific supply chain, if there are risks of, for example, mixing in supply chain, and if you have proper evidence of origin. And based on that, you have to document your risk assessment and also justify your risk conclusion. You have to, and that has to be applied for each supply chain, which is important to underline here. You have to review your risk assessment annually and also make it available for competent authorities on request. If risks are identified, risk of deforestation or risk of illegal activities for certain legal requirements, you need to implement and prove that proper risk mitigation have been implemented in the supply chain. So that, of course, brings us to the question of what is the role of certification, because certification often, many schemes cover some aspects of the EUDR requirements, or maybe increasingly all of them. And the legislation definitely recognize certification as tools to meet risk assessment requirements, but it does not provide a green lane, and so you cannot refer to certification as the only tool or evidence of low risk. But it will and can play an important role in reaching your conclusion about low risk or negligible risk. Also want to mention that the EU Commission will be doing and conducting or develop a central database of deforestation risk assessments, so that countries will be classified at 3 levels: low risk, standard risk, or high risk. This will be a mandatory set of risk assessments that companies shall apply in their due diligence system. We right now don't know exactly when. I think the Commission will publish these, but they are under development, and they will play a quite significant role, because if low risk is identified, it will reduce the due diligence obligation of operators. Then lastly, I would like to just mention that there are in the regulation some specific requirements on how to check operators. It states that the competent authorities in each member state have to do a certain level of checks on operators based on risk. And so there will be a more aligned check of implementation of the regulation across EU member states than what we've seen, for example, for the EU timber regulation. There are also a set of tools in the toolbox for competent authorities, which range from rectifying any formal non-compliances, requiring operators to rectify non-conformances, and basically to withdraw or recalling the relevant products from the market, and so on. There are certain tools listed here from the regulation. I should maybe mention, I didn't do that at the beginning, sorry, but in the top of the slides, you will be able to find a reference to the articles in the regulation that the slides are based on. And here are some of the penalty tools that the competent authorities are expected to build into national legislation. And so that could vary from country to country, what the exact penalties will be in place when enforcing the legislation. So with that, I would just mention that from Preferred by Nature side, we're supporting a lot of companies in how to understand and implement the requirements. We are providing tailored services and also engage in risk assessment of both at the country level, especially on legality risk assessments, understanding also that the risk for deforestation will be published by Commission. We also engage in certification against several of the schemes that are now adapting EUDR components and aligning with EUDR so that they can provide proper assurance of compliance with the requirements. I also want to mention that we recently announced the cooperation with SBP, FSC, RSB on the Risk Information Alliance, and if you're interested to learn more about that, please feel free to use the link in this slide. And then lastly, I'll just mention or refer to the EU Commission website, where there is also a very lengthy or a link to a very lengthy Q&A document. It has more than 80 questions and quite comprehensive answers. So I would definitely recommend anyone interested to look at that, because it provides a very good overview and understanding of many of the questions that had come up. And there will be a new updated Q&A document coming out soon from the Commission. So I think that was it from my side. So feel free to reach out to me or to my colleague David Hadley, who is our Regulatory Program Director and expert on EUDR. Thanks.
Super. Thank you so much, Michael. Great presentation. And yeah, let's go straight away for the Q&A sessions. We have one question already from Tobias here. Question on the required risk assessment frequency triggers for a new risk assessment. ADD statement must be submitted for each import, and each DDSTs must be backed up. Well, wait. sorry guys, must be backed up by a risk assessment. If anything are a relevant changes between imports, for example, relevant land plots and harvest dates, does this they imply the need for a new risk assessment, or would an annual review still be sufficient?
Right. That's a good question. Thank you very much. The risk assessment have to apply to the actual supply chain that the products are coming from. And if changes happen in that supply chain, which means that the risk assessment is no longer covering the supply area or the land or that the products are sourced from, then the risk assessment will need to be updated. Also, because of the requirement for providing geolocation in the due diligence statement alone will mean that you need to have up-to-date information about the origin of your products. So I hope that answered the question. The annual review and update of a risk assessment would apply to existing supply chains and reviewing if any significant changes have occurred in relation to the risk conclusion.
Super, Michael. Thank you. Guys, just for the sake of time, let's go through just one more question. Just remember that we're gonna go through all the questions offline if we don't have to take over all the questions during this session. Does EUDR apply to products imported for the company's own use?
It applies when it's imported or used in a commercial activity, and that would normally also mean that it's for product company's own use as well. That's at least the understanding that was clear under the EUDR, and to my understanding also applies to EUDR.
Super. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you so much for your presentation. Let's move forward for the next one. David, stage is yours now.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen.
Guys, and you can see the contacts, the information from Michael in the chat right now. Sorry, go ahead, David.
No problem. So I'm going to briefly talk about traceability and its role in EUDR, and just very briefly talk about what we IAV42 are doing to try and help operators comply with this new regulation. So first thing I'm going to cover is actually, well, what do I mean by traceability? It might mean different things to different people. This isn't going to be a comprehensive thing, but I just wanted to frame what I meant when I'm talking about traceability. So if we start really simply, so identifying the source. So we've already heard that this is a key part of EUDR. We know it's a key part, knowing the point of origin for your raw materials. But then we need to think a bit wider. So how do we know that if the claim of a point of origin really is the point of origin? Well, we need to be able to trace that. We need to be able to complete the links in the chain. And this is done through documenting the processes, how and where transformations are happening, and also track the movement of goods through the supply chain. We can start to build up the links. We also need to be able to capture where relevant standards and certification is being adhered to, and legality. We've already heard about that. What I'm talking about in terms of traceability is capturing that information. Storing all this evidence, it's going to be needed as proof. We've seen how the enforcement will be checking, depending on the risk. They've got targets to hit. They're gonna come to operators and ask for evidence on the decisions that they've already made and the due diligence statements that they've already submitted. So it's going to be really important to capture that and store that information for at least 5 years, as we also saw. And then being able to analyze that data and report on that data. It's all about making wise, sensible decisions. And so traceability is the key component that feeds into that decision-making process. Why is it important? So we need the documented evidence. I've talked about that. Transparency. How can you have confidence that the claims of origin and reliability of the links do actually prove the source? How are you able to hold your suppliers accountable for their practices, their products, and the data they provide you? How can you manage your risk effectively? How do you get the market access? You won't be able to get access or retain access to the EU markets without a reliable due diligence process. The regulation no longer means that traceability stops purely at import. So those that were had the requirement under EUDR, for example, if they're in the timber trade, the requirement stopped with them. But now, because of the export, there's going to be downstream requests for the information, so other people can fulfill and verify due diligence processes. Responding to those enforcement requests. How to support your achievement of your own corporate sustainability goals. Traceability, for example, is going to be required for compliance with emission regulations. And then finally, how do we give consumers and customers confidence in the products that are being sold? So how do we achieve traceability? Well, there are real challenges to traceability, and potentially top of the list is supplier engagement. Suppliers in the past have not been very keen to share the sort of information for many reasons. Commercial sensitivity is a big one. Not understanding why is another one. So how do we help them engage? The sheer amount of data, so the amount of manual, repetitive, and duplicate work. Someone asked the question about, am I going to have to do due diligence on every shipment, or will an annual one suffice? Well, being able to see if there are differences, knowing there are differences, so you know where you need to adjust or update your risk assessment when each shipment comes in. Being able to process information in a timely manner. The regulation speaks about before you can actually bring it into the EU, you're meant to supply the due diligence statement, and so there's a real risk of demurrage charges occurring. Sheer complexity of supply chains, in particular, where mixing can occur, and the reliability and trustworthiness of the data, and then the sheer size and scale of the data required. We recently put out a survey amongst about 300 timber operators across multiple European countries, and some of these challenges we saw reflected in the responses. It's available here. We'll also make it available after the webinar as well. But just to highlight a few of the issues that we saw, so around awareness, the challenges in traceability in terms of time efficiency, the willingness of suppliers to engage, the lack of digitalization. But there was some positivity as well towards the regulation and to traceability solutions, that in terms of the effect on business, people thinking that they'll be able to grow their organization based on these things. So what do we need to achieve traceability? So I come from an industry, the financial industry, which I managed to escape a few years ago. But it's an industry that I was part of and saw have to go through a similar regulation-driven digital transformation. So they had to change from using emails and spreadsheets to having more robust systems that could handle the scale and the accuracy required to meet regulation. So it's fascinating to see yet another industry having to go through the same challenge. But with challenges also comes real opportunity. So people need to look at this as opportunity, not just challenge. So as I said, the vast majority of traceability still relies on emails and Excel. And some organizations have a digital systems to collect data, at least from their tier 1 suppliers, but we need to be able to go further back than tier 1, and we need to facilitate that movement of information through the supply chain. So we need new systems for information exchange. They need to give the supply chain participants the tools needed to capture and organize that information, and it must facilitate the sharing of relevant information downstream. Ultimately, we think there will be a need for interoperability. The demands in terms of data volume are going to grow significantly, and we can no longer expect suppliers to use 20 different systems from 20 different customers. We need to be able to capture the contribution of third parties, such as PBN, to introduce trust into the data that's collected and distributed. we need to recognize that the data belongs to the data originator, not the operator. They need to be in control of their own data and to choose what to share with whom, and have the ability to hide that commercially sensitive data. This will help remove some of the barriers to supplier engagement. Finally, these new digital systems need to be able to analyze and report on the data, and this is why integrations with technology such as Orbify, which you hear from a bit later, are critical to help users make sense of the data and to answer those critical questions. So what is Intru? What is it that we're building? So fundamentally, I've kind of already described what it needs to do, and that's what we've been building. But it's a data platform that allows users to securely collect that data and to manage it, share it, protect it, but also to integrate with other value-add systems to help with the reporting, analysis, and ultimately that decision-making process. Our goal fundamentally is to bring together information and technology. We don't say we are the one solution. It's much more complex than that. There are all different parts that will play a role in helping people achieve due diligence and at the scale required as well. So with all these different pieces of the puzzle, they need to be pulled together, and how clear those pieces are and how trustworthy data is going to be important to have a reliable due diligence process. So what are we building? So here's some of the features. So there is supply chain mapping, not only at the just the suppliers, but also at the product and at the shipment level. We help capture that data that gives that end-to-end traceability. We capture geolocation, and then we've integrated with Orbify so that you can assess the necessary aspects of that geolocation for risks such as deforestation. We allow you to do rule sets, be able to define what you expect from suppliers and for them to know what is expected by you and to know what is missing. Again, helping with that timeliness of information. So data management, organizing and maintaining the relationships between data, increasing efficiency, sharing that data with customers and parties such as auditors, enforcement, and other stakeholders. We need to have APIs that talked about there needing to be interoperability between systems, but also being able to integrate with other systems like the EU due diligence system. The management of data required for risk assessment and risk mitigation. And we're also integrating AI. It's a bit of a buzzword at the moment, but this is a data problem. So using AI as a traceability system, we think is going to become really important to help companies deal with the scale of the challenge. And finally, a mobile application to help with data collection, particularly upstream. Our whole approach is centered about not just building a tool for operators, but also a tool for the suppliers. So we believe that to get engagement from suppliers, they need the tools to help them, both in their business and to help them provide the data that their clients are looking for. So what have we seen so far? So I've already mentioned about market access, but we're really seeing this play out. We're seeing participants see differential benefits of being able to provide the traceability data package as part of their product. It's adding a premium to their product. Customers have recounted due diligence activities that took them months to complete before being completed in a matter of hours, if not minutes. The quality of the data is going up, and organizations are able to do more with their existing resources, keeping their costs down. I mean, we see there's a real challenge on both recruiting and retaining compliance and sustainability workforce, particularly for small and medium companies. They train up workforce only to lose them to larger organizations, and with them the knowledge of their supply chains. And this is where digital systems can help capture that information that will help mitigate the risk of lost knowledge. And finally, peace of mind. With the penalties of EUDR being significant, everyone is looking for peace of mind, and an effective digital system can help provide it. And so just a final thought, I found this quote, which I think is quite appropriate. If you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. We believe that to achieve sustainability and everything that this encompasses, the days of going it alone are over. We think that the journey to sustainability will involve industries working together in ways they haven't in the past. And so at IOV, we strive to help bring organizations together to equip them for the journey with the digital tools, but also with the expertise of our partners who are with me today. So thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much, David. Yeah, we have same. I mean, I think we have time for at least 1 or 2 questions here. Guys, you can see already the David's presentation here. You can download it. And yeah, let's see this one. Where do you see the main potential of AI as a facilitator of traceability and due diligence?
Yeah, great question, and it's one we are still exploring. I'll be honest and say I think we're only scratching the surface of it. It relates to anything from some of the simple things like translation. I say simple, things that cost an awful lot of money in the past to you can now do through AI translation and get some really good results. So, but integrating that system, helping with the efficiencies. But there are other things as well, such as document classification, extracting key information, looking for things such as reuse of documents. So in terms of trusting supply chains, we know and we've seen cases of documents such as log removal passes being reused inappropriately. So AI is remarkable, even in being able to detect these sort of things. It's being used a lot in the financial world in terms of fraud detection. We think it can help in the due diligence process in terms of giving confidence in the data that you're looking at and its relevance, its accuracy, its authenticity, and what have you. So as I said, we're just scratching the surface on what AI can do, and we're doing it very carefully as well. The other thing you have to bear in mind with AI is that you have to make the decision ultimately. An AI machine is not the one who's going to have to pay the penalty. So that's why we talk about AI being an assistant rather than it being a replacement for your due diligence process.
Amazing. Thank you so much, David. Let's move forward for the next presentation. And guys, questions, drop in the chat. We will answer all the questions afterwards, just for the sake of time. And yeah, Will, it's your turn. Stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Right, there we are. Okay.
All right.
So yeah, thanks to Preferred by Nature and IOV42 for giving us an overview of EUDR and the traceability aspect of it. I'm just going to have a quick run through of some Earth observation technical considerations for the regulations. We'll just have a very brief recap before we dive into it. So the EUDR is an EU attempt to combat deforestation and forest degradation since 2020. And that bit's quite important because it's actually a retroactive regulation in that respect, because deforestation and forest degradation cannot have occurred since 2020. It applies to 7 different products and their derivatives. And most of the time it's the importer that must provide the evidence regarding deforestation status. It's going to be fully implemented by the end of this year. And to ensure compliance of any product to the regulations, satellite data should be used or should make up a significant component of it. So what are the data required for EUDR assessment? Well, first of all, as we've heard, geolocation data is required as part of the regulation. And this is geolocation data of the plot of land where the commodity was grown or produced or sourced from. And plot of land essentially just means the entire farm where the commodity was produced. Now, if this farm is greater than 4 hectares, a polygon is required to delineate the farm boundaries. And if the farm is less than 4 hectares, a point or a coordinate pair is deemed acceptable. However, we recommend using a polygon wherever possible because it allows more accurate results, essentially, with regards to satellite imagery analysis. So we couple this geolocation data with satellite imagery to assess compliance to the regulations. Now, there are several optical and radar satellites which provide imagery on a daily basis. The main ones being the Sentinel constellation, which is run by the European Space Agency, and the Landsat constellation, which is run by NASA. And with these data sets, a number of peer-reviewed and proprietary data sets have been created to monitor forests. And with regards to the regulations, what we're interested in are areas of forest, particularly in the year 2020. And this forest is defined as areas greater than 0.5 hectares with a greater than 10% canopy cover and tree heights greater than 5 meters. We're obviously interested in areas of deforestation, the commodities that are grown in the region, the indigenous territories and protected areas, and general land use change. So all of these we can combine to create a really good EUDR compliance assessment. But obviously, with all data, there are a number of technical considerations, and I'm just going to briefly touch on a few of them here. So the first one is geolocation collection. So as far as I'm aware, this is one of the first regulations that requires this geolocation information, which means that a lot of companies and supply chains don't actually possess this information and need to go out and collect it. Now, a solution to this is a mobile application where a farmer can download the application, and using the GPS on their smartphone, they can map the boundaries of their plot of land. And then to verify that the crop is actually being grown on this plot of land, we can take geotagged photos. This is a photo with geographic information, so coordinates as to where it was taken. And we can look at the coordinates of these photos and the plot of land, make sure that they align. Now, this is not the perfect solution, but it's the best we've got at the moment, and I'm sure better solutions will be coming soon. One important thing, though, with regards to geolocation collection and this sort of technology is that a number of the crops that are come under the regulations are grown by smallholders, and these smallholders may lack the technology and the technical expertise to undertake these sort of geolocation collection and assessments. And it's really important that these smallholders don't get left behind and excluded from the EU market, because some companies have already signaled their intention to get rid of smallholder farmers from their supply chains who can't comply with the regulations. So it's really important to work closely with your supply chains to help them with geolocation collection and provide them with the knowledge and tools to prevent them being excluded from the EU market. So the second one we're going to look at, and probably the most important, is data accuracy and relevancy from satellite imagery. So every data set has its strengths and weaknesses, and it's really important to be transparent and acknowledge these weaknesses and provide solutions. Now, as I mentioned in one of the first slides, deforestation cannot have occurred since the year 2020. So we need a really good forest baseline for the year 2020. And if we look at this GIF here, this is two different forest maps for the year 2020 that we use. And we can see in this AOI, this plot of land, they differ quite significantly in where they delineate forest to be. So the first one is the European Commission JRC Global Forest Cover Map, which is shown on the GIF now. And the second one is the Tropical Tree Cover Extent Map, which is shown now. And what's really important about these two data sets is they're both open source and their strengths and limitations are understood. For instance, the JRC map struggles in areas where the topography is quite steep, so on steep slopes, and it also struggles to separate some commodity crops like coffee, cocoa, and palm oil. So it will often confuse them with forest, which is obviously not ideal for the regulations. So it's really important to combine multiple different data sets like this. At Orbify, we use a decision tree approach where we can assess, where is the AOI, which data sets are going to be performing best here, and give the user some indication of, yes, there's forest, no, there isn't forest, or actually, you need to inspect the plot because it's inconclusive. And we can provide a user to do this. We can provide tools for a user to do this with, say, high resolution imagery. But another thing we can do is also flip it on its head and actually detect the crops instead of the forest. So if we can detect the crops in the year 2020, we know that there wasn't forest there, and it was actually crops, so we know that it's likely to be compliant. There are a number of peer-reviewed open source data sets of commodity crops, like the one here. So we've got this one, it's just showing planted soy in Brazil, but there's also ones for palm oil and all sorts of things like that. But, like I said, there's strengths and weaknesses with every data set. Some crops are actually really hard to detect. One example of this might be shade-grown coffee. So this is coffee which is grown under a canopy cover. This canopy cover can often be eucalyptus. So when we're looking at it from a satellite imagery, it looks like there's just eucalyptus there, which is not part of the regulations. So we wouldn't be able to detect the coffee underneath. Like I said, it's often it's important to provide the user with analysis of all these data sets to provide them with some sort of overview, but also, if we do have problems, let them know and provide them with the tools to do a manual check. The third one that we're going to look at is this jurisdictional level analysis, or country benchmarking. So as preferred by nature, explained to us, the countries will be given a risk level, which will be high, standard, or low risk. And the risk level is based upon the risk of producing commodities that are not deforestation free. And the methodology for this is still being developed by the EU. So we don't actually know which countries are going to be which category yet. All countries will currently begin with standard risk. But I think it's really important to provide a user with some indication of what country their plot of land, what the risk of the country that their plot of land is located in. And we can do this by assessing the deforestation data within that country and benchmarking it against other countries in the region to give an indication of, yeah, okay, that's a high-risk country. You may want to do more due diligence in that area to prevent deforestation and allow your products to be compliant to EUDR. And finally, we're going to have a look at timber. So once again, as preferred by nature, explained to us, timber has to be degradation-free, not deforestation-free, because by its very nature, if you're harvesting trees, it is deforestation. So degradation, defined by the regulation, is not a typical definition of degradation, which would focus on forest quality and health. It's actually refers to a structural change in the forest itself. So it's the conversion of primary forests or naturally regenerating forests to plantations, other wooded land, or planted forests. Now, forest degradation can be trickier to detect using satellite imagery than deforestation, because obviously deforestation is clear-cutting trees. So from a satellite image, we'd be looking at bare ground, whereas forest degradation, you're looking for more of a reduction in canopy cover. Now, there are data sets out there that we can measure this with, which is all good, but it's important to take that into account. It's particularly easier to detect with the higher resolution open source imagery, such as Sentinel, which is 10-meter resolution. But what I think is really interesting with forest degradation is that, let's say a forest, we get a plot of land that's got timber on it, and we're asked to do an EUDR compliance assessment. And we can look at the satellite imagery and say, yes, right, that's fine. It's not resulted in a significant degradation because at the time that they want the EUDR compliance assessment done, there hasn't been significant degradation. It's just selective logging. So we say, right, okay, it looks all clear to us. That product then gets imported and put on the EU market. But sometimes selective logging can be a precursor for large-scale clearance of forests. So after the product's already on the market, the land could be turned into, converted to a plantation forest. So I think this is something that will be reviewed in 5 years when the regulations get reviewed again, because they will be reviewed every 5 years. But yeah, something to certainly think about at the moment. So just to summarize, we've got a number of technical considerations with EUDR. Some parts of the regulations are still being developed, but we can provide solutions for those parts. Most of the data is available already, but like I said, there's limitations which need to be understood, so we can utilize it in a suitable way. And with regards to this, open source data is invaluable because accuracies are known and reported, and it's replicable for other people and other authorities. So that's all from me. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and thanks for attending.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Will. Really nice presentation. We have 3 minutes left. I think we can go through 1 or 2 questions. First question here, how easy is to create polygons from GPS data? Are there any tools you can recommend?
I think there are a number of apps that you can do it with, but I would always say the easiest way of creating polygons is to actually do it in some sort of GIS software. So if you have a GIS specialist in your team, that is the easiest way to create polygons of certain plots of land.
Cool. Next one, maybe this question can maybe Michael as well can see this one from José here. Considering that the area has experienced legal deforestation authorized by Brazilian government after December 31st, 2020, less than 20% of the total area, is it possible to implement any kind of risk mitigation that allows a product to be placed in the European Union? What mitigation measures can be taken in this specific case?
So I understood we're talking about illegal deforestation, which is a conversion of forest, as I understand it, after the cutoff date.
Yes, it seems that has experienced legal deforestation, yeah, so it's authorized by the Brazilian government. Yeah.
If that happened after 2020, then those products grown on that land cannot be placed on the EU market. I don't see any mitigation steps that can make it compliant because it was grown on deforested land.
Yeah.
So if I understand the question correctly, I don't see any mitigation steps, but maybe others have other comments.
Oh, super. Thank you so much. Maybe, José, if you want to drop here, if we understood correctly, you can drop a message. And we are almost there. I think we have time for one more. Due to requirement of verification of geolocation, will this not mean that the same polygons will assessed again and again from many different operators?
Yes, I think that is quite likely. It depends when, obviously, so combined with the geolocation, we also need the time and the date range of when the product was harvested. So, if these date ranges are different between certain products, then it will need to be reanalyzed again to make sure it is compliant.
Super. Thank you. One more, just to close. Can you distinguish forest types along EUDR definitions, or do you have respective data sets?
Yes. Forest types is not necessarily, we don't necessarily need to distinguish between forest types for EUDR. It's just forest or non-forest. But we can distinguish between different forest types using satellite imagery, and there are multiple data sets out there to do that. So yes, possible with both types.
Amazing. Guys, we are, it's 5 p.m. now. I would like to thank you so much again, our speakers today. It was super nice, was super insightful. Thank you, David. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Will. Thank you for watch it, and stay tuned for our upcoming webinars. You're going to receive the recording of this webinar plus all the materials that we presented today, and we hope to see you soon again. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. See you later.
Thank you. Bye.